Hello, my name is Kevin Crowe, and this is one of two videos to launch my collection of short stories, No Home in This World. Here it is, which is being published by Fly on the Wall Press. The current crisis means I'm unable to launch the collection at bookshops or festivals, so we're launching it online. I'll be talking about issues related to my writing, followed by reading from my work. On this video, I'll talk about things that make it more difficult for some people and some communities to find outlets for their work. On the 1st of May this year, published to coincide with International Workers' Day, Professor Katie Shaw of the issued a report called Common People, Breaking the Class Ceiling in the UK Publishing. She interviewed a number of working class writers, looking at the difficulties they faced, and in her forensic examination of the publishing industry, she criticised the centralisation of most major publishing houses in London and the lack of diversity in the industry. She argues that because of the lack of diversity, working class writers are less likely to have contacts within the industry and are often excluded from social networks. Other research has noted that approximately 90% of those employed in publishing are white. And though women make up the majority in the industry, they earn between 10% and 30% less than their male colleagues. LGBT plus writers also face problems getting their work accepted by mainstream publishing houses. An article in the trade magazine The Bookseller 3 years ago, gay author Matt Cain wrote about the barriers he'd come up against. He said he'd been told there wasn't a market for gay-themed literature and that such work would not be of interest to people who weren't gay. Even when LGBT plus writers do get their work published, he said marketing departments tend not to promote the books. It's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. Publishers say there is no market for gay literature, so don't promote the few books they do publish, then claim the lack of sales proves their point. In other words, the publishing industry in the UK is primarily middle class, white, heterosexual, centric, and despite the percentage of women working in it, dominated by men. All this not only makes it harder for many of us to get our work published, it also means that the books readily available to the reader don't represent the diversity of multicultural Britain. Not everyone finds shelf after shelf of books by and about middle-class white heterosexuals to be that appealing. Now, I was brought up on a Manchester council estate by parents who encouraged me and my siblings to make the most of our talents. Later, before going to university as a mature student, I worked in pubs and factories, where I met a diverse range of creative people, all of whom had things to offer. One of my friends at the time, a labourer on a building site, was secretary of his local James Joyce Appreciation Society. We spent many an evening in the pub, arguing about the relative merits of Joyce and my favourite writer, Charles Dickens. In one of the factories where I worked, I met a folk singer, and the two of us put together an anti-war drama that combined poetry, folk song, and storytelling, and that we performed with others at various folk clubs in the Midlands. Through my involvement in trade unions and political campaigns, I met poets, novelists, musicians, dramatists, painters, and others, few of whom had found an outlet for their work, none of whom had publishing or recording contracts. What a waste of talent. The Booker Prize is arguably the most prestigious award for fiction that we have. Of the 55 writers since its inception in 1969, only 13, 1-3, are non-white. When you remember that until recently, the prize was for writers who wrote in English in Britain, Ireland, and the Commonwealth, and the majority of Commonwealth citizens are non-white, this really is quite disgraceful. Only 18 of the winners have been women. The only openly gay writer to have won the Booker so far is Alan Hollinghurst in 2004. And one of the very few working class writers to have won the award is James Kelman in 1994, who is also the only Scot to have won the Booker. In 2018, Anna Byrne won the Booker for her wonderful novel Milkman, set in a working class estate in Northern Ireland. 2019 winner Bernardine Evaristo wrote about the interaction of race, gender, class, and sexuality in her amazing novel Girl, Woman, Other. But in the main, the Booker is still overwhelmingly white, male, middle class, and straight. One of the assumptions sometimes made about gay writers is that we only write about gay themes. Nothing could be further from the truth. Some of the stories in this collection have gay themes, but others don't. And like any writer worth their salt, I write about a range of contemporary, historical, and occasionally futuristic concerns. But my experience of presenting gay-themed work to writers' workshops has been mixed, to say the least. It was not uncommon for me to be criticised in ways that non-gay writing wasn't subjected to. The story I will shortly be reading, Texan Condoms, is an example of that. I wrote a first draft of the story about 10 years ago and presented it to a workshop. Although the story as published is very different from that first draft, the central part, Sean's journey to Texas, is similar. The story was ripped apart and some people in the group got extremely angry. One woman told me she was offended to be subjected to what she called obscene material. Another told me he objected to having homosexuality shoved down his throat. Yet another began his remarks with, "Some of my best friends are gay, but," and so it went on. I put the story aside for a few years, my confidence in it undermined. It was only a couple of years ago that I returned to it when I was looking for something suitable to submit to an anthology of literature inspired by HIV/AIDS pandemic. I spent a lot of time rewriting and editing the story. It was accepted for the anthology Disclosures, published by the Edinburgh-based publisher Stewed Rhubarb. I was incredibly surprised and pleased when Jackie Kay, one of my favourite contemporary writers and the current Scottish Macar, described the story as utterly absorbing. And the Macar in Scotland is the equivalent of the Poet Laureate. So, here is the story, Texan Condoms. First, a swig of tea. Texan Condoms. 2017. Yet another World AIDS Day service. Yet another day reflecting on all those whose lives have been cut short because of a virus no one knew existed. While their bodies are being damaged by cancers and infections they have no way of resisting, they're being told they brought it on themselves by their irresponsible behaviour. They are blamed for an excessive love. They were condemned as a danger to others. Times have changed. The virus and its effects can now be treated. We can now love without being judged. We can marry. Though I sit next to my husband and my partner over a quarter of a century, I am not immune from survivor guilt. 1979. The fierce Texas sun exacerbated my hangover. I drank as much water as I could manage, attempting to ease the discomfort in my dehydrated body. I packed my sleeping bag and tent and headed south along Highway 87. Wearing a hat and long-sleeve shirt to protect my pale feet from the sun, I thought about the previous night's excesses. I had no recollection of how I'd got back to the campsite, but I did remember the wonderful evening of outlaw music, Lone Star beer, and Sensimilla weed. At least I was told it was Sensimilla. It could just have been very strong grass. I dumped my stuff at the campsite, then headed the few miles to Luckenbach, arriving there mid-afternoon. Sitting outside the bar, drinking Lone Star beer and chewing on beef jerky, my accent attracted others. All wanted to know about me. None of them had ever met a Brit before, and were amazed I'd found my way to this tiny hamlet in the middle of nowhere. One gnarled, weather-beaten redneck invited me on a rattlesnake hunt. We gas their nests. We only shoot them if we have to shoot them, because shooting them destroys the skin, which means we can't sell it. We sell the venom to hospitals or snakebite serum, and the body to restaurants. It's fun. I politely declined. Someone else asked, "Hey man, why not stay for the dance tonight?" He spoke in that low, lazy, sexy Texan drawl, where each word seems to take a minute and even an eternity. I looked up at this giant of a man with long brown hair, unkempt beard, and a t-shirt with Cosmic Cowboy on the front and Willie Nelson, a president, on the back. I did stay for the dance. Lots of loud country music from Waylon and Willie wannabes, Lone Star, bourbon, and weed. I made many friends, all of whose names I've forgotten now, and asked, "Where you headed, son?" "San Antonio." "You're in luck. Dump your stuff in the back." The first thing I noticed was how cool the car was inside. Although I've been traveling around the States for a while now, I still haven't got used to air conditioning. On this occasion, after the oppressive heat of the Texan summer, I was glad of the coolness. I'd always had this image of Americans driving large gas-guzzling cars at high speed. The gas-guzzling bit was probably still correct, judging by the size of the car. But President Carter had recently introduced a national 55-mile-per-hour speed limit, and it was strictly enforced. So he cruised along at a much more sedate speed than I'd expected from the other side of the pond, while the radio played Texan country. "Well, son, it's all the way to Texas." Another low, lazy Texan drawl. "Oh, I'm just spending a few months traveling around America, mainly in the South. Ever since I was a boy, I've wanted to come to Texas. Ever since watching John Wayne films. I love the music. Waylon, Willie, Guy Clark, Bob Wills. Could listen to it all day long." "Wow, man. Didn't know your music was popular over there. Good to know. Good to know." "Oh yeah, it's really popular. There are country music festivals and lots of clubs." I looked at the driver. A smile was playing across his face. "And what do you think now you're here?" Well, Texas is certainly big. And I wasn't expecting all this. I waved at the lush hill country scenery. I didn't realize there was all this greenery. And I love the sight of those hills covered in blue flowers. Yeah, it's beautiful. But you have to be careful where you put your feet. I nodded. I told him about a walk I'd taken near a stream and how much I was enjoying it until I saw a rattlesnake blocking my path. I very carefully and very slowly backed away and returned to the road, I told him. He laughed. A wise move. Without taking his eyes off, he stuck out his hand. "I'm Hank. I shook his hand and told him my name was Sean, adding, a good old Irish name, though I wasn't born there. Nice to meet you, Sean. After a short silence while I looked at the passing scenery, he asked, so what's been your favourite bits of Texas so far? Oh, Austin was special, particularly the World Armadillo headquarters. And yesterday I was at Luckenbach. Truly memorable, except I can't remember much thanks to all the beer. Hank guffawed. Yeah, I spent time at Luckenbach, and I bet it wasn't just the beer. At that moment, the Welling Jennings song about the hamlet came over the airways. We both sang along to the radio. As the song faded out, we were both grinning. That was good, I said. He nodded. Sure was. He turned to me, taking his eyes off the road just for a moment, and asked, hey, back home, do you have a girlfriend? Nothing special, I replied. Hey, I would have thought a good-looking dude like you would have had the girls running after him. I laughed. Me? Good-looking? You must be joking. Not at all. I really do think you're good-looking. Yeah, well, the girls don't think so. Not that I'm bothered. To tell you the truth, it's a bit of a relief. Now, why would that be? I just shrugged my shoulders. I wasn't about to say anything else. It was still illegal in Texas. I felt his hand resting on my knee and gradually moved to my thigh. I could feel myself getting aroused. I reckon I know why you aren't interested in girls. He moved his hand back to the steering wheel. What are your plans when you get to San Antonio? He asked. I don't really know, I replied. Look for a campsite or a cheap motel for a couple of nights, then head out west. Stop at my place for a while, if you like. I wasn't sure. I was excited about the thought of spending time with a real Texan, perhaps even a cowboy or a rodeo rider. But there are so many stories of people being picked up and then hurt or even murdered. I knew nothing about him. Even his name could have been false. But he knew nothing about me either. And I felt nauseous with desire. Such was my reverie, I didn't notice that buildings had replaced the countryside until we pulled up outside a condominium block. Here we are, Hank said. Home, at least my home. I followed him along the manicured lawn and past the flower bed to his apartment. The apartment didn't do justice to its opulence. Oil paintings on some walls, bookshelves and others, a crimson carpet with piles so thick you could lose yourself, a state-of-the-art hi-fi system, leather sofas, and off to the side a kitchenette. Everything was spotless and in its place. Until he put on some music, the only sound was the humming of the air conditioning. Wow, I said, pirouetting around. Wow, this is, well, just wonderful. Glad you like it. But I didn't drag you here to sell you the place. He bent his index finger in the universal sign for follow me. Sitting next to him in the car, I hadn't realized just how big he was. Over 6 feet, with bulging muscles covering his arms and upper body. He towered over my 5 feet, pale and weedy body. I followed him into the bedroom. It was even more opulent than the lounge. There were mirrors on the wall and on the ceiling above the large emperor-sized bed. From a fridge in the corner, he produced a bottle of bourbon and filled 2 glasses, passing one to me. I took a sip of the smoky liquid, my hand shaking as I lifted the glass to my mouth. Nervous? He asked. My heart was racing, to shake my head. No, just. He ended my struggle for the right words by kissing me, deep and long. I felt so puny compared to him and wondered what was about me that attracted him. We made love, exploring every crevice of each other's bodies. Afterwards, we collapsed, breathless and sweating, arms around each other. I must have dozed off because the next thing I remember was Hank kissing me and passing me another bourbon. That was wonderful, he said. Yeah, I grinned, slightly embarrassed. I took a sip of the drink and then said, hope you don't mind me asking, but why did you use a condom? I mean, you can't get me pregnant. They don't just stop pregnancy. He was silent for a moment, then continued. Recently, there's been an increase in fags getting Hep B. Puzzled. Hepatitis B is a liver disease and it can be spread by sex. A lot of people don't know anything about it or how to protect themselves until it's too late. He hesitated, then continued. I ain't saying you've got it, and I ain't saying I've got it. It's just a precaution. You don't mind, do you? I giggled. If you can fuck like that, you could wear a whole box full. He grabbed me and we made love again. I stayed with him for 4 weeks. He showed me around San Antonio, the wonderful river walk, the Alamo, the restaurants where I developed a taste for tacos and enchiladas, the art galleries, the nightlife. One night he took me to a gay club, though being Texas, it couldn't be advertised as such, where he introduced me to lots of people. Everyone referred to him as Rubber Man, and there was some good-natured banter at his expense. One camp mincing queen told me he'd take me back home with him so I could experience real Texan sodomy, skin against skin. I declined. I was perfectly content with Hank. Eventually the time came when I had to leave. Before returning across the pond, I wanted to spend time in the desert and the Sierras. I stopped with Hank so long, I'd already decided not to bother with the Castro area of San Francisco. After all, what could I find there that Hank hadn't given me? Hank agreed it was probably time for me to leave. He was a freelance journalist and he got a commission for a job that would take him to Louisiana for some research. There were tears as we parted. He headed east. I went west. 19, not to bother with the Castro area of San Francisco. After all, what could I find there that Hank hadn't given me? Hank agreed it was probably time for me to leave. He was a freelance journalist and he got a commission for a job that would take him to Louisiana for some research. There were tears as we parted. He headed east. I went west. 1998. Benjamin had come home to die. He had insisted. He had told the doctors he wanted to spend his last days in familiar and friendly surroundings. His treatment had come too late, and the side effects were so bad they had taken him off the drugs. He had lost so much weight we could see his bones, and he lacked the strength to walk unaided. His body was changing his continence pads and moving him to avoid bed sores. We also rolled his joints. Cannabis is one of the few things that could relieve some of the pain. It also helped him sleep and stimulate his appetite. We would sit him up, liquidize his food, and patiently feed him with teaspoons, small enough quantities for him to swallow. He'd have several bouts of pneumonia, and eventually, when his immune system was no longer capable of resisting anything, one final attack led to his death. Just another AIDS victim. I remember the conversation we had when, just 3 years earlier, following some illnesses, he tested positive for HIV antibodies, and he was told he'd developed AIDS. Went out for a drink, spoke about this and that. Neither of us seeming to want to mention the doctor's verdict. Partway through his third pint, he looked at me, smiling sadly. I think I know where I got this thing, I really do. He took another swig of his beer. I believe it was the summer of 1979, before anyone even knew about AIDS. After I'd finished at university, I spent a couple of months in San Francisco, stopping in Castro. Christ, I was like a kid in a sweet shop. The bars, the bathhouses, the steam rooms, the saunas, more available men than I could handle in a lifetime of cruising. And whatever you're into, no matter how weird, it was available. He was silent for a few minutes, then said, "At least I had fun, I suppose." Pint. I think I'd like to go home now. 2017. As the final hymn begins, I take my husband's hand, aware that Benjamin would never know what that felt like. A lifelong gay activist and secular Jew who had withstood both anti-Semitic and homophobic violence. Like Moses, he never saw the liberation he did so much to make possible. As we shuffle out of the church and fasten our coats against the cold winter wind, I hear Benjamin telling me the best way to remember him is to live our lives to the full and celebrate our love. Thank you.